All right, let's dive into something I think is pretty fascinating today.
Okay.
The world of office campus appraisals.
Right.
You've sent us some articles on this,
Yeah.
and it's clear that you're interested in more than just the basics here.
Definitely.
So today we're going to unpack the surprisingly complex world of valuing these properties.
Yeah.
Forget simple square footage calculation.
Right.
We're going beyond to uncover the nuances that really make all the difference.
It's a whole different ball game than a single office building, that's for sure.
I bet.
Yeah.
It's not just one building, it's an entire ecosystem.
Right.
What are some of the unique challenges that come with appraising these office campuses?
Well, imagine this. You've got state-of-the-art office towers standing shoulder to shoulder with buildings that are, shall we say, vintage.
Oh, wow.
Think of former industrial spaces, maybe even broadcasting studios or health clubs, as mentioned in these articles.
Right.
Each building has its own history, its own quirks, and that's a far cry from evaluating a single structure. And it makes determining that market value a very fascinating challenge.
Wow. I'm already starting to see how complex this is.
Yeah.
It's like each building on a campus has its own story, its own stage of life,
Yeah.
right?
Absolutely.
And speaking of stages of life, one of the articles you shared mentioned functional obsolescence.
Right.
What exactly does that mean in the context of an office campus?
That's a great question. It's a concept that can make or break an appraisal.
Okay.
Essentially, it means a building or even just parts of it aren't as useful or desirable as they once were.
Okay.
Design trends change, technology evolves, and suddenly what was once cutting edge is outdated.
So like that old VCR in the back of my closet.
Precisely.
Outdated, but still holds a weird sense of nostalgia.
There you go. Now imagine a campus with a building designed for large-scale manufacturing.
Okay.
Those high-energy demands and limited flexibility might not be suitable for a modern tech company, making it functionally obsolete.
Okay, that makes sense. You can't exactly have an open, collaborative workspace with those low ceilings and limited power outlets.
It's true.
Speaking of tech companies, they seem to have completely changed the game when it comes to office spaces.
Absolutely. And their influence goes far beyond ping pong tables and kombucha taps.
Okay.
A building's technological infrastructure is now just as important as its plumbing or electrical systems.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So what kind of tech are we talking about here? Is it just having enough bandwidth for everyone to browse cat videos?
It goes way beyond that.
Okay.
We're talking fiber optic cables, robust Wi-Fi, enough power outlets to support a small country.
Wow.
Things many older buildings just weren't designed for.
Right.
When you're assessing an office campus, you can't just slap a price on the entire property.
Right.
You have to look at the technological capability of each building.
Okay.
That old storage building might be ripe for demolition, while the office tower next door could be a gold mine.
Interesting.
It's about piecing together a very complex puzzle.
And this is why simply calculating price per square foot just won't cut it for these properties, right?
It really doesn't.
You have to consider which buildings are contributing to the value and which ones might be dragging it down.
Exactly.
It's about understanding the nuances of each structure.
It is.
But what about location?
Okay.
Everyone knows location is everything in real estate.
Right.
Does that still hold true when we're talking about these sprawling office campuses?
That's where things get even more interesting.
Okay.
With campuses, it becomes less about general location and more about hyper-specific factors.
Hyper-specific. Okay, you've piqued my interest. Tell me more.
See, with campuses, we're often talking about properties that span entire city blocks,
Right.
even crossing town lines sometimes.
Wow.
So it becomes less about being in a trendy neighborhood
Right.
and more about the very specific advantages that location offers.
Okay, I'm starting to get... So, give me an example of these hyper-specific factors.
Let's talk about economic incentives. Did you know a recent study found that companies relocating to campuses with generous tax breaks saw, on average, 15% higher profitability within the first 5 years?
Wow.
That's huge.
Yeah.
A hefty tax incentive package from a local government can be a game changer for a corporation
Right.
deciding where to set up shop.
Wow, 15%. That makes a lot of sense.
Well,
Those tax breaks could mean millions in savings,
oh, absolutely.
which is definitely something companies consider.
Of course.
Are there other factors that come into play?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You also have to look at things like tax rate differentials.
Okay.
Even between neighboring towns or cities, those rates can vary significantly.
Yeah.
And that's a major consideration for large-scale operations like these sprawling office campuses.
Right.
And then there's the often overlooked factor of development approvals.
Ah, yes, the bureaucratic side of things. That can
Yes.
be a minefield.
Exactly. Navigating those permits and regulations is no joke, especially for big projects.
Right.
A campus in an area with streamlined, efficient approval processes is going to be much more attractive to potential buyers.
Makes sense.
Time is money, after all.
It's like a high-stakes game of real estate chess.
It is.
You've got to think several moves ahead,
Right.
considering all these angles.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we've talked about the buildings themselves,
Yes.
the tech inside the location.
Mhm.
Is there anything else we need to factor in when we're talking about valuing these massive properties?
Don't forget about the land itself,
Oh, right.
specifically what's known as excess land.
Oh, yes, the mystery acreage. How do you even begin to put a price tag on that?
Right.
It's not like there's a website that says, here's how much a 10-acre plot next to a former broadcasting studio turned tech incubator is worth.
You're right. It's not that simple. Traditional appraisal methods, like comparing to recent sales, get a little fuzzy because of the sheer scale we're dealing with.
Right.
We have to ask, what's the highest and best use for this land?
Okay.
Is it more valuable as part of the existing campus, or would it be better suited for redevelopment?
I imagine that answer the highest and best use can change depending on the market, the economy.
Of course.
Even things like what's trending in office design, right?
You hit the nail on the head.
Yeah.
It's a dynamic equation, constantly evolving.
Right.
For example, if redevelopment seems like the best option, how long would it take to attract developers, get permits, and actually execute those plans?
Right.
That time factor plays a huge role in determining the land's present value.
So we've got to factor in the time value of money, the potential for redevelopment, the ever-changing demands of the market.
It's true.
It's a lot to consider. All this talk about the future of these office campuses makes me wonder,
Yeah.
with the rise of remote work, are these massive office spaces even going to be relevant in the future? What does that mean for their value?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Right.
As appraisers, we have to be forward-thinking.
Right.
If remote work trends continue, those sprawling campuses designed for thousands of employees might not be as desirable.
Right. It might be less about having a ping pong table and more about having rock-solid internet and soundproof phone booths for those Zoom calls.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that shift could completely change how we value these properties.
Wow.
Will we see a decline in demand for massive campuses?
Right.
Will companies prioritize smaller, more flexible spaces?
Right.
These are all questions that will shape the future of office campus valuations.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
It really is a fascinating puzzle.
It sounds like the world of office campus appraisal is anything but simple.
You got that right.
There's a lot more to it than just measuring square footage, that's for sure.
It really is. It requires analytical rigor, a deep understanding of market dynamics, and the ability to anticipate the future needs of businesses.
Wow.
It's almost like being a real estate fortune teller trying to predict what the future holds for these sprawling properties.
Okay, now that's a job title I haven't heard before, but you're right. It's
Yeah.
about looking at historical data, current trends, and then making those educated guesses about what's coming next. And just when you think you've got it all figured out, the world throws a curveball, like a global pandemic that completely reshapes the way we work.
Right.
It's constantly evolving.
Exactly. You have to be adaptable, willing to adjust your methods as the market changes. And I think that's what makes it so fascinating. There's always something new to learn, a new challenge to tackle.
So for someone like me who's just starting to understand the complexities of office campus appraisals, what's the biggest takeaway? What's the key insight I should hold on to?
I think the most important thing to remember is that valuing these properties is far from a simple formula. It requires a deep understanding of not just the real estate market, but also corporate decision-making and all those hidden factors that influence value.
So it's not just about crunching numbers, it's about understanding the why behind those numbers.
Yes.
The motivations and the external forces at play. It's about seeing the bigger picture, right?
Absolutely. And perhaps most importantly, it's about never losing sight of the human element. Because ultimately, these valuations are about understanding how people work, how businesses thrive, and what they'll need in the future.
It's about creating spaces where people can do their best work, whatever that might look like in the years to come. That's a pretty amazing thing to be a part of. Well, thank you so much for taking us on this deep dive. It's been incredibly insightful. I think we all learned a lot about the intricate world of office campus appraisals. And for our listeners at home, we'll leave you with this thought-provoking question. As technology continues to advance at an unprecedented rate, how might the very definition of an office campus evolve, and what new challenges will that present for appraisers? Food for thought, everyone. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and we'll see you on the next Deep Dive.